Welcome back to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into a situation that really feels like a geopolitical tremor. It's shaking everything up.
It really is.
I mean, just in the last 48 hours, oil prices up 20% globally, stock markets dropping.
Yeah.
And there's this feeling, isn't there, like we haven't faced something this potentially dire since maybe World War II?
It's incredibly tense.
Yeah.
And the story is changing, I mean, literally every second. A full-blown conflict, maybe even, nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not off the table.
Scary stuff.
Absolutely. So it's really critical we try and understand what's going on. Our goal here for this deep dive is to break down the why and the what, who started this, what could happen next.
Right.
And it just a heads up, this analysis, it's based on what we know as of June 14th. Things could look very different tomorrow.
Definitely. So think of this as your shortcut, your way to quickly get the core pieces of this really complex, fast-moving crisis. We want you to have the key insight.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so the spark, the immediate thing that kicked all this off, it started just, 2 days ago? June 12th?
June 12th, yeah.
Israel launched this sudden, very coordinated strike against Iran, and military experts are calling it what was phrased the most careful strike in 40 years.
Careful?
What does that even mean, careful strike? Is it about precision, targets? What makes it stand out like that?
That's a good question. So when the sources say careful, it seems to point to a few things. First, the precision was apparently astonishing.
Okay.
Iran's two main nuclear facilities, these are like their most heavily secured spots, hit at the same time with missiles.
Wow. Both at once.
Simultaneously. And second, the other targets were really strategic. Big cities like Tehran, Isfahan, they lost electricity, internet.
How?
Well, the strikes apparently hit the specific management buildings for those systems.
Very deliberate.
Exactly. It wasn't random bombing. The goal seemed to be creating this sense that Iran was suddenly cut off, state TV went dark, government websites just collapsed.
So careful means surgical, really. Disabling key things.
Pretty much. Disabling key infrastructure, military capabilities, maybe trying to limit broader collateral damage, but achieve very specific aims.
And alongside the infrastructure hits, the human cost was also, audacious seems like the word.
Audacious is right. At the same time, like within just a 2 or 3 hour window, key Iranian figures were assassinated.
Who are we talking about?
Mohammad Bagheri, Iran's army chief of staff. I mean, just imagine the equivalent leader in your own country being taken out like that.
Yeah, that's major.
And not just him. Numerous nuclear scientists, other high-ranking, heavily secured army people, all killed.
Inside Iran.
Inside Iran. It really highlights the boldness, you could say, of carrying out targeted killings like that in another country.
Yeah.
Especially hitting figures tied to their nuclear and military commands.
So Iran gets hit like this, precisely, strategically, taking out top people. What happens next? How did they respond?
Well, it took about 12 hours, it seems, for them to grasp the full picture. Then they declared tough revenge.
Tough revenge. How did that differ from, say, past flare-ups? Like, we've seen tensions before, right?
Right, but this felt different. Often in past conflicts, like maybe the India-Pakistan fighting, attacks usually stay focused on military sites.
Okay.
This time, Iran's threat was explicit, direct. They said missiles aimed right at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Civilian centers.
Yeah, with the stated aim of causing maximum damage. That's a huge escalation, a direct hit on major cities.
So Iran fires the missiles. What was the result? Did Israel's defenses hold?
Israel's Iron Dome system, their air defense shield, it did intercept a lot of them. That's what it's designed for. But crucially, sources say many still got through. Enough to cause a state of emergency in Tel Aviv, widespread panic.
Okay. And casualties. Do we know how bad it was on either side?
Well, that's the thing. What's really striking, and our sources point this out, is that both sides are basically concealing the numbers.
Really? Even with international media asking?
Repeatedly asking.
Yeah.
But both Israel and Iran are keeping quiet on casualties.
What does that usually imply, that silence?
It strongly suggests the damage was significant on both sides. Especially given the targets involved nuclear sites, major cities, it makes it really hard for anyone outside to know the true scale. Creates a sort of fog of war.
Right. It makes de-escalation harder if no one knows the real cost.
Exactly. And then, just 2 hours after those Iranian missiles hit, Israel fired back with another threat.
What was that?
If Iran didn't stop, they would flatten Tehran.
Wow.
Yeah.
Flatten Tehran. The rhetoric is just incredibly high stakes.
Off the charts.
Okay, so to really get why we're at this incredibly dangerous point, we kind of need to step back, right? Look at the history, because it's surprising.
It really is.
Most people probably don't know this, but before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Iran and Israel, they were actually, like, friends, cooperating.
That's right. Strong diplomatic ties.
Yeah.
Iran even used to buy military gear from Israel. Think about that. Buying weapons implies a significant level of trust.
So what happened? What was the turning point that flipped that relationship completely?
The absolute key moment was 1979, the Iranian Revolution and Ayatollah Khomeini coming to power.
Right.
After that, Iran's whole policy shifted, gradually but decisively. They started directly backing anti-Israel groups, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Palestine, different factions in Iraq, Syria.
The groups actively fighting Israel.
And Iran's official stance became crystal clear. Sources from back then quote their declarations: Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth, and that Iran would support anyone, anywhere, fighting against Israel. It was a complete ideological U-turn.
So that leads to the next, 40 years of this proxy war dynamic everyone talks about. Can you explain what that actually means?
Yeah, for 4 decades, basically they were sworn enemies, everyone knew it, but they avoided fighting each other directly, face to face.
How did they fight then?
Through these other groups. Iran would fund or arm Hezbollah, who would then clash with Israel and Lebanon. Or they'd support Hamas's operations against Israel from Palestine. It was always conflict through an intermediary. Exactly. They were pulling strings, maybe, but their own armies weren't shooting directly at each other. And that whole proxy setup, that's how it was, until, as our sources dramatically put it, the day before yesterday.
Which makes this direct exchange, missiles on nuclear sites, missiles on Tel Aviv, such a massive, massive shift.
A fundamental change. The old rules, whatever they were, seem to be gone.
Right. So if they managed this proxy thing for 40 years, why now? Why did Israel launch this attack now? What triggered the direct confrontation?
Well, the sources we've looked at are pretty clear on this. They strongly suggest it's primarily about one thing: the nuclear situation.
About the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict that's always in the headlines.
That's obviously constant backdrop. But the immediate trigger for this specific major escalation seems to be Iran's nuclear program.
Okay. And that program's not new, is it? Iran started it way back in the 80s.
That's right, back in the 1980s. And Iran's justification at the time, according to reports, was self-protection. They said it was for world peace, given their difficult neighborhood. They claimed it wasn't for aggression.
Just security.
That was their line. But Israel's stance on this has also been consistent and very public for decades.
Which is?
Basically, that it would not tolerate any country nearby getting nuclear weapons, full stop. Sources show Israel stating it would go to whatever lengths needed, even fighting to the last drop of blood to stop it.
So an absolute red line for Israel.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And it's, worth mentioning, analysts sometimes point out that Israel can perceive actions as being against them, even if not explicitly stated, like maybe Iran's initial nuclear ambitions.
Okay, so this tension simmers for years, and then in 2015, there's a major attempt to defuse it, right? The Iran nuclear deal.
Exactly. The agreement between the U.S. under Obama and Iran. Big international effort.
What was the deal, basically?
Iran agreed to pause, to significantly roll back parts of its nuclear program. In return, the U.S. lifted about 20 major sanctions.
Which let Iran back into international trade, sell oil again.
Right. It was meant to ease the economic pressure and provide verification that the program wasn't weaponizing. Things seemed, somewhat hopeful for a bit. People even linked Obama's Nobel Peace Prize partly to that deal.
But that didn't last.
No. The turning point came in 2018. The Trump administration pulled the U.S. out of the deal, just unilaterally withdrew.
And put the sanctions back on?
Immediately. Reimposed all the sanctions. And Iran's response was just as swift. They resumed their nuclear program, basically restarted the work the deal had paused.
Which brings us right back to the present, and Israel's justification for this preemptive strike now.
Their stated rationale, according to sources, is that they believe Iran is now too close. Dangerously close to being able to build a nuclear weapon.
How close?
The time frame they're reportedly citing is incredibly alarming, potentially ready within 1 to 2 weeks.
1 to 2 weeks. That's almost no time at all. What does that time frame signal? I mean, Israel must have watched this program for years. What makes this the moment, beyond just being close? Does it tell us something about their intelligence or maybe their own red lines shifting?
That's a really critical point. That 1 to 2 weeks, if accurate, isn't just about the technical capability. It suggests Israel feels it's reached a point of no return, a critical window. The analysis in our sources suggests that while the nuclear program is the reason, the timing feels strategic.
Strategic how?
Well, maybe they saw a moment of international distraction, maybe a perceived vulnerability in Iran, maybe their own calculations about risk just changed. It forces you to ask, okay, yes, the program is advanced, but why strike now specifically?
Right. It suggests more than just the technical threat level.
Exactly. It implies a high degree of confidence in their intelligence about that time frame and a deliberate high-stakes decision that this was the moment to act, despite decades of watching.
Okay, let's shift to the fallout, the global implications. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. One immediate and frankly very unfortunate consequence is already clear, isn't it?
Yes. What numerous sources are highlighting is how this huge flare-up is immediately sucking up all the media oxygen.
Meaning attention is shifting away from other things.
Exactly. Attention is shifting away from the ongoing situation in Gaza, which, according to various reports, hasn't stopped. The violence, the humanitarian crisis there, it continues. And as the material we reviewed points out, many analysts are interpreting this shift in focus. Well, they see it as potentially benefiting Israel strategically, drawing eyes away from Gaza.
It's important we state, like you said, we're just reporting the analysis from the sources here, not endorsing that viewpoint.
Absolutely. Just presenting the perspectives that are out there in the information provided.
And then there's the economic impact. We mentioned oil prices surging 20% almost overnight. What does that mean for, well, everyone listening?
It means prices for almost everything are likely to go up. Everything we buy relies on transport, and transport relies heavily on oil.
So it ripples through the whole economy.
Much more powerfully than people might realize. Remember the Ukraine-Russia war and its impact on wheat prices? Oil is like that, but magnified. It hits supply chains, shipping costs, manufacturing, and ultimately the price you pay at the checkout, pretty much immediately.
A global economic shockwave.
Potentially, yes.
And that leads to the most frightening possibility. The risk of this escalating into something much bigger, a third world war. Is that really on the table?
It's the most alarming scenario, but yes, it's being discussed. When you look at the likely size,
Who lines up where?
our sources suggest Russia and China would almost certainly back Iran. Maybe not directly militarily at first, but politically, economically.
And on the other side?
The U.S., the U.K., other Western allies, they'd support Israel.
And that's how major wars have started before, isn't it? Regional conflicts pulling in the big powers.
It's a chillingly clear parallel. Both World War I and World War II started with regional crises that escalated as alliances kicked in and global powers chose sides. That dynamic, unfortunately, is very present here. It shows how interconnected and maybe how fragile things are.
Which brings us right back to this moment. We've gone through the immediate events, the surprising history, the nuclear reasons. It really feels like a moment of profound gravity.
It truly does. And as you, the listener, take all this in, it's worth thinking not just about the facts we've laid out, but also about which stories get told, which narratives become dominant, and maybe what gets pushed into the shadows when a crisis like this erupts.
Yeah. It leaves us with that really heavy question, the one that's on so many minds right now looking at all this. Are we actually moving towards a third world war?
A sobering thought.
Indeed. We really encourage you to stay informed, keep digging deeper into these critical events as they unfold. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.